At the Oval Office yesterday, Dr. Oz, the CMS chief, and RFK Jr., give me number 55 here. They're calling attention to the fact that the birth rates in this country continue to fall. It was an event for moms. They launched something called moms.gov yesterday. And here's a little from Dr. Oz talking about the birth rate in the country.
That 1 in 3 Americans are underbabied. What does underbabied mean? That means that you either don't have any children or you have less children than you would normally want to have. And to Katie's point, we have a crisis that's causing our fertility rate to drop below 1.5. The replacement rate is 2.1. So we're way below what we need just to replace the people that we have in America. And one of the challenges is that rural America, where there's 60 million people, have a mortality rate, maternal mortality rate when they have babies. That's about 30% higher.
That's a stunning statistic. 1 in 3 Americans underbabied. We have a crisis causing fertility rates to drop below 1.5. Replacement rate is 2.1, so we're way below. Why are people not having children? Healthy debate, something we ought to talk about in this country. The MAHA movement is trying to do something about that, and RFK Jr. here in number 56 to that end, doing more to try to help mothers and women have not just successful pregnancies, but births too, and encourage motherhood. Take a listen.
Stress what a huge win for the MAHA movement and for the pro-life movement. Moms.gov is. It is one-stop shopping for IVF, for prenatal care, for postnatal care, for nutrition, for baby formula, and of course for Trump RX. We have, as Dr. Oz pointed out, a fertility crisis in this country right now. We just found out that we've dropped now to 1.57%. The replacement rate is 2.1. 100 years ago, we were at 3.27, so more than double than we are today. We are approaching the cataclysmic rates that Japan and China are now experiencing that is threatening their economy. It's a threat not only to our economy, to our national security, it's a direct threat to our Social Security Trust Fund, to the Medicare Trust Fund. President Trump has directed my agency to find out the cause of the fertility crisis, and that is part of this program. We're looking at the impact of metabolic challenges, which directly affect fertility, of obesity, which affects fertility, of endocrine disruptors, of pesticides, of this toxic soup that our young women are walking around today to try to figure it out. The fertility crisis for women began in 2007. For men in 1970, men had twice the sperm count as our teenagers do today. This is an existential crisis for our country. We had a series of presidents that were trying to discourage childbirth and motherhood in this country. We now have a president that is trying to encourage it, and I want to thank you again for your leadership. I just wanted to stress how
this is a hugely significant issue, obviously. And what's interesting about this is it's really not even economic. What you heard RFK Jr. say there is that there is a health-related crisis in the country, like that women and fertility specifically. It's not even a matter of choosing not to have children or not. It's that many cannot get pregnant now. I was not aware of those stats. I didn't realize how dire it was. What I've been reading is economically, so many people, particularly women, are choosing to not have children. They don't want to be mothers. A lot of different reasons for that. I think men are trending more toward wanting to be fathers. So it sounds twofold. There's a cultural element here of men and women and family attitudes. There's a schism. But then also there's a health-related issue. And the MAHA movement and RFK Jr. says there's something about our environment. He's not entirely sure what that is, but sperm counts are dropping, fertility dropping with women. Is it obesity? Is it the things we're consuming? What is it? It's a big deal. And structurally, this is where when you talk about Social Security, remember, those of you who are drawing it or about to draw it, it's dependent on young people coming up and working and paying into the system. That's what it's all about. And older folks get very panicked because they say, you're going to take away my Social Security. It's not a matter of taking it away. It's a matter of not enough people paying into the system and it going completely broke, which arguably it already is. But it's not a sustainable business model for the country to continue to pay older Americans who are no longer working when fewer and fewer and fewer young people are working and being taxed and paying into the system. So it's a real problem, ladies and gentlemen, and one that shouldn't be ignored. And again, political folks want to kick the can because nobody wants to talk about this. Nobody wants to be the politician that says, Grandma, Grandpa, I know you count on Social Security, but here's the thing. We've got to look at this. And they say, don't touch mine. I say, well, no, I think there's a way we can probably fix this down the road. Maybe there's a cutoff. I don't know what age. We could have a healthy discussion about what age, but at some point, we have to have a serious discussion about the math. And I don't know when it's coming, but at some point it's going to be forced to get here, given the numbers that the boys from CMS and DHS just shared yesterday. Or HHS, I should say. Meanwhile, on this front, the Supreme Court extended a freeze on new restrictions on mifepristone, allowing the widely used abortion pill to continue being prescribed by mail. The extension, which runs through 5 o'clock Thursday, provides a reprieve for pharmacies, telehealth companies, and clinicians caught up in the latest legal tussle over accessing mifepristone. And if you don't know, that's basically the abortion pill. And even states that have outlawed abortion, you can still order this stuff, and they'll send it to you. I heard a woman give a speech at a pro-life event that I attended recently, and she, just as an example, got online and showed us how easy it was to have this stuff shipped to her in a state where it is not legal. It was shipped to her unmarked, and it was shipped to her like Skittles. I'd never seen anything like it. It was literally just, hey, take one, take a couple. If you want to really make sure, here, pop a few more. People selling this stuff unmarked and mailing it to women all over the country in all states of the union. Anti-abortion activists have been calling for a rollback of the Biden administration policy that expanded access to mifepristone and removed a requirement that patients see a provider in person before getting the medication. At a bare minimum, when you think women ought to be seeing someone in person before taking something through the mail that causes them to terminate a life. So the Supreme Court's going to end up weighing in on that eventually, but we'll continue to follow it. Speaking of the Supreme Court, they also weighed in, the Democrats. For all the frustration that we're having with Republicans, the Democrats are still very stymied. They don't know how to win an election yet. They're not popular. Nothing they stand for or on is resonating with the American people. They know this, so they continue to have a fight about how can we rig this to our advantage. And they've done so largely with districts, redistricting, trying it in Virginia. And of course, as we covered here, Virginia's Supreme Court said that, no, you cannot redraw your districts this way. That's not going to work. And Democrat leaders in Virginia are asking the Supreme Court to allow the state to use the congressional map drawn by Democrats and approved by voters. In an emergency application, the state's attorney general and other officials urged the justices to overturn the decision by the Virginia Supreme Court. Now, I can tell you, given what I've studied about this Supreme Court and their willingness to get involved in elections, drawing boundaries, counting votes, certifying votes, almost without exception, the Supreme Court of the United States has said, you guys handle that inside your own states. That's not our deal. We don't get involved in boundary drawing and counting votes and things like that. That's on you. So I have every reason to believe that the Democrats are not going to succeed before the United States Supreme Court, that this Virginia Supreme Court ruling is going to stand in tossing out these newly drawn districts. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court has halted, though, Alabama's order for 2 largely black U.S. House districts. And why? What's the difference? You say, Stigall, you just said the Supreme Court is loath to get involved in this stuff. Well, they are, unless it's a violation of the Constitution, which they have ruled on already. It is a violation of the Constitution to draw congressional boundaries based on race. That is fundamentally an affront to our founding. You can't do that. That's discriminatory. Now, that is when the Supreme Court gets involved. The Supreme Court doesn't want to get involved when, the legislature draws boundaries, then the Supreme Court of the state gets involved and says, no, that's not constitutional. The Supreme Court of the United States is comfortable saying, all right, you fellas and ladies, handle that in your state. We're not going to get involved. But when the state tries to, or the party in charge in a state tries to redraw boundaries based on race, as they did in Louisiana, that's when the United States Supreme Court gets involved and says, no. That's out of bounds. Now you're violating the Constitution. Here's the story from AP. The United States Supreme Court yesterday set the stage for Alabama to eliminate one of two largely black congressional districts before this year's midterm elections, creating an opening for Republicans to gain an additional U.S. House seat. The decision, as I said, follows a Supreme Court ruling in April that struck down a majority black U.S. House district in Louisiana as unconstitutional racial gerrymandering, which significantly weakens a provision of the Federal Voting Rights Act. Alabama officials had pointed to the Louisiana case as the reason for the Supreme Court to end a judicial order to use a court-imposed House map until the 2030 census. That's another thing that the Democrats are sweating. That 2030 census, most that have studied this believe the population will have shifted so dramatically that by the 2030 census, if all of these Republican redistricting efforts hold and the 2030 census is released, Democrats could, there are some people who say Democrats would almost be guaranteed political wilderness, given the fact that so many people have fled the populations of big blue states and big blue cities in favor of red state America, that we could see a wholesale slaughter of the Democrat Party for maybe a generation by 2030. That's why they are, if you've been wondering where has this come from and why so suddenly, Democrats are freaked out. And this Virginia Supreme Court ruling, really a blow to their plans. So that's what they're reduced to try to win. How do you also know Democrats are in trouble? Well, let's start with education for one. Remember how once upon a time the NEA was foursquare supportive of the Department of Education, and now Trump and Linda McMahon, the Secretary of Education, they basically came on board and said, our job is to eliminate the Department of Education and send it back to the states. We don't think the federal government has any role in educating kids. We think that's best done at the state level. Have you noticed that the NEA has stopped fighting that entirely? And why? Because most people agree with that. Most people know that the federal government intervening in how we educate our kids was never supposed to be the model. It's only been around since 1976 or something. So it makes sense that it goes away. It was never effective. It never worked. Outcomes were never better. Money was being spent more and more and more every year, and outcomes continued to get worse and worse and worse. And in fact, to the point, Jeff Yass yesterday talking about all the money that New York is spending on public education per student. It's a stunning number, and it's why Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, has had a bit of a heart change. Listen to some of these stats. Number 62 here on what we're spending in New York. That is at the, I should say what New York taxpayers are spending per student.
New York City spends roughly $37 billion a year to educate about 850,000 kids. That's over $42,000 per child per year. And the results are abysmal. 2/3 of fourth graders can't do math properly, and almost 3/4 can't read at grade level. You don't have to be an expert in fractions to know that is bad. Let's agree that the political reality is we cannot reduce the amount of public education spending at all. Fine. What can we do, Mr. Mayor, is tell every mom in New York City that the $42,000 currently spent on that terrible education is going to be her money. Here comes some more advanced mathematics, some more long division. We are going to give her half, 21,000. That's 42,000 divided by 2. Every year she will receive that as a voucher for her child to attend whatever school she wants. We are going to take the other 21,000, put it in a real account, not a fictional Social Security account, for which her child is the sole beneficiary. If it returns a paltry 2% over the next 13 years, that child will graduate high school with $300,000, enough for college, trade school, or a down payment. Give $300,000 to a graduate who can do math and read and write, and adios affordability crisis. No more need for $30 million government grocery stores, free buses, or rent control. This solution is such an obvious win for New York City mayors that I am confident that Mayor Mamdani will hear this talk and he will agree and he will change the policy.
Wow. That is huge. That's a guy named Jeff Yass. He is a billionaire. The Manhattan Institute honoring him as one of the 2026 Alexander Hamilton Award honorees. And how can you argue with the math? How can you argue with that point of view? $42,000 per pupil in New York City. For what kind of results? Bad. And so just imagine giving half of that money to parents to spend as they choose and take the other half and invest it in the private market. This is a cousin concept to the Trump baby bonds plan. Remember the Trump accounts? $1,000 seed money if you had a baby that's another one of those things they're trying to, back to the RFK Jr. and the fertility problem, trying to encourage people to have children, but also letting the free market and compound interest work for young people. Deposit $1,000 seed money in an account for a baby born during the Trump era, and nobody can touch it. It's locked in there. You can contribute so much to it, like a 401k. And I don't remember the basic simple math on it, but with modest contributions to that thing from birth until the kid's 18, you're sitting on six figures by the time the kid's an adult and ready to leave the house or go on to school or whatever. And you can use that money for down payment on a house or their educations or what have you. Same thing Yass is proposing here. $42,000 a year per kid. Can you imagine what you could do for your child with just half of that, while the other half goes and sits in an interest-bearing account? I mean, these are big thinkers who are saying, back to the Social Security problem, again, it didn't math. Remember, we're not having enough babies. Older people are drawing from a system where new people are not paying in. And so we're trying to foster and encourage an environment where people have children and the private sector goes to work by taking that money that the taxpayer is giving to kids for educations, taking half of it, putting in the private sector. I'm so inspired to see that finally there are fiscal conservatives who are explaining well, and Mr. Yass there explained well how the basic compound interest is a benefit to people, much, much better than the government taking your money and spending it for you. The private market is always going to be the better friend to the American family and young people, and I just love it. Now, Kathy Hochul, the governor, how do we know that the worm is turning specifically on education? Kathy Hochul intends to opt the state into the federal tax credit scholarship. The announcement represents a major win for supporters of private school choice who have been lobbying Democrat governors to participate in the program. The American Federation for Children, a national school choice advocacy group, said Thursday night that Hochul first made the announcement at a private gathering. A spokesperson for the governor confirmed Hochul's plans to opt into the tax credit. So that's big. Governor Hochul, supportive of the federal tax credit scholarship and its potential to help New York students and schools. Our office awaits information from the federal government on the program and will thoroughly review details of the policy. Treasury is still in the process of developing guidelines for the program, which will clarify, for example, how donated money might benefit public school students or whether states can prevent scholarship granting organizations from discriminating against certain students. So again, this is kind of educational scholarship grants funded by the taxpayer who, instead of, let me explain how it works here in Missouri, from the Heartland, for instance. Missouri's income tax. I can dedicate half of my tax burden in Missouri, if I choose, to these educational granting arms, if you will. So it's not educational savings account. That's not the word. It's escaping me in a minute, the term. But anyway, I can dedicate half my tax burden in the state of Missouri to these funds that then families can apply to receive tuition assistance to choose a private school. But again, it's not taxpayer funded in the sense that it's new tax money. It's money that I would be paying into the system anyway, but it's money that instead of paying all to the state of Missouri, I can take half of it and dedicate it to the education of Missouri kids who want to apply for the scholarship. Makes sense? So it's the federal government is basically trying to encourage every government, every state government to sign on. Democrats have resisted it, of course, but again, Mr. Yass just gave the case why this should be the case, and Governor Hochul, I mean, you can't ignore it. You can't ignore it. Gavin Newsom also trying to continue to remain politically relevant. So there's Governor Hochul giving in and finally acknowledging that parents want choice in education. Gavin Newsom, this is rich, has requested an extension of FEMA funds for survivors of last year's devastating wildfires. Welcome to the party, Governor. The request asks for another 12 months of individuals and household program assistance through FEMA. Previously, Newsom called for FEMA to release more than $732 million in public assistance funds. He's also expanded direct financial support for victims, and on and on and on. But we all know what this is. Things are not going well for California Democrats, and that's one of the most interesting developments is the Republicans coming on strong, and it may well be, whether it's the gubernatorial race or the mayor's race in LA, you could be looking at a Mayor Spencer Pratt. You could be looking at a Governor Bianco or a Governor Hilton, perhaps. It's gotten that bad. Everybody has kind of wondered, how bad does it have to get in California before they start to look at Republicans again? We might have hit that. I don't know, but we might have. Karen Bass, by the way, has canceled her next debate with Spencer Pratt. If that tells you how poorly it's going, LA Mayor Karen Bass has decided to skip out on the upcoming mayoral debate scheduled tomorrow. Campaign spokesman Alex Stack said Bass will instead travel to Sacramento, where she will be fighting for criminal state funding for housing, homelessness, and Palisades recovery, and will also discuss the city and state partnership on the Olympics and World Cup. It's time to move past debates. Mayor Bass's withdrawal is disappointing. Public forums such as this are a cornerstone of a democratic accountability. These forums also provide voters with the opportunity to hear candidates share their perspectives, respond to questions, and the like, said a spokesperson who was going to put on the latest debate from the League of Women Voters. So Karen Bass has ticked off the League of Women Voters in California. I love that. It's time we move past debates. I'm sure that's how she feels. So she's hiding. Don't look now. Spencer Pratt may well end up mopping the floor with this bunch and becoming the next mayor of LA. It would be huge if so. Speaking of problems for Democrats in California, they continue. Eileen Wang, the mayor of Arcadia, California. Aaron, do we know, is that in the north or the south? I didn't Google where Arcadia is. California, a huge state. I have absolutely no idea where that is. Southern, northern? Yeah, southern, northern, middle? I don't know. All right. Well, if you find it, let me know. Meanwhile, so you people in Arcadia, my apologies to you. I mean, no disrespect. But anyway, Eileen Wang is the mayor of Arcadia. She has been charged with acting as an illegal foreign agent for China, said the Justice Department. Wang agreed to plead guilty. Starting in 2020, Wang worked with another guy together to operate a website called U.S. News Center that purported to be a news source for the local Chinese American community. The Justice Department said in a plea agreement that Wang and this other guy received and executed directives from the People's Republic of China's government and their officials to post pro-PRC content on the website, and sometimes sought approval from PRC government officials to circulate other pro-PRC content. So California is awash in Chinese spies and Chinese operatives. Eric Swalwell had to leave the campaign because he was having sex with one. So, and then there's Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris wants another bite at the apple, folks. As former Vice President Kamala Harris considers another run, this from NBC News, she's also signaling she has no problem with the public airing of what went wrong last time, telling donors she believes the Democrat National Committee should release its buried autopsy of her failed campaign. While she indicated to donors that she has no issue with releasing it, Harris has not discussed the postmortem with the DNC's Ken Martin and did not know about his decision to keep it under wraps until it happened. Like most prospective candidates, Harris is staying involved in political affairs that includes touring the country, giving speeches to state parties, and developing the framework for a policy platform and sounding out fellow Democrats about her next chapter. What's unique about Harris, writes NBC News, is that while she tries to orient toward the future, many in her party are actively fighting over whether to keep examining the flaws of her last campaign. Or maybe just moving on. See, doesn't this speak to, this is a great way to wrap up today. Doesn't this speak to my point that while you may feel frustrated, if you are in fact a conservative or a Republican, or maybe you supported Trump and now you're mad or you don't really understand what's going on with gas prices or his strategy in Iran or whatever, stipulated, but set all that aside for a minute. If you're worried about the Democrats, just understand they're running. They're running for the tall grass. They're refusing to debate, and the best they've got is a woman who spent over $1 billion, historically burned money like we've never seen before in a presidential campaign, and lost, and still considers herself as the front runner, and the party considers her the front runner too. The polls for Democrats in the toilet. They have nothing to offer, nothing to sell, nothing new. They don't have a bench. So again, I'm not suggesting that just because Democrats are so weak, that gives Republicans an excuse to do nothing. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm just saying I would take a deep breath for those that are just sure that coming this fall is some sort of landslide victory for Democrats. I don't see evidence of that yet, folks, but that's just me. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Heartlander. News from America's Heartland. Be sure to subscribe to Heartlander News here on YouTube if that's where you watch it. And be sure you give us a like so you can keep up to date on all the latest news from Heartlander News. I'm Chris Stigall, and I'll see you back here next time. Thanks for watching.